Here's another. Here's something. This is a little bit a field, but well, when was it? Was it yesterday that we were talking about Eric? Yeah, of course, it was yesterday that we were talking about. Do you know these Weinstein brother guys?
Yeah,
not the ones, not the Miramax people, but Brett Weinstein, who was the guy from Evergreen College, who was very upset. He felt like there was a problem with transgender stuff, or I can't even.
No, there was symbolic acts of a day of absence that he thought was attack on whiteness.
Oh, okay. So you had an issue with unnecessary demonization of white people, I guess, or something that by some by college students, and so he built his career there as someone who was disaffected, and then his brother got in on the whole thing. He works for Peter Thiel, and they became, members of the IDW, I guess. And for years, one of the members of the IDW was Dave Rubin. And yesterday, I was talking about why Eric Weinstein is still bringing me up in these interviews as someone who is problematic. It just seems like, first of all, if he was really talking to intellectuals, with all due respect to me, they'd have no idea who he's talking about if he would bring up Sam Seder as an example of something. I'm sorry. It's just like in intellectual circles, I'll interview some people, but I'm sorry. With all due respect.
They'd be referencing Barry Weiss. Let's just be very clear.
No, you'd be talking about, this, the intellectuals are not limited to the world of people who are on YouTube. I should say that right now. Okay. And
then you don't get clicks, Sam. That's
particularly for people who are in their 50s. Okay. and I hypothesized yesterday that based upon a phone call I had with Eric Weinstein like a year ago, or I don't know when it was, maybe last summer, where he was really dissing Dave Rubin in some not so subtle ways, explicit ways. And I got the sense that maybe what's going on here, since Dave Rubin had moved over to Beck's, Glenn Beck's operation, The Blaze, and had announced that he was going to run for president, that he was going to support Donald Trump for president, Dave Rubin was, that maybe Eric Weinstein wants to get into the Dave Rubin slot. Essentially, he sees a market opening, and he knows that part of that is I'm just going to take Dave's bet noir, essentially. And I thought it's a theory, but then this thing comes out. This is his brother on his brother's podcast, which apparently he does with his wife. And listen to this.
I've been shocked at the proclivity of so many of my friends to subscribe wholeheartedly to the woke mentality. Do you think intellect and attention to detail has anything to do with the political choices people make?
Pause it. Listen to that question. I mean, it's put judgment aside for a moment. The question is I can't believe my friends who are so woke. Do you think personality has anything to do with ideology? That's the question. And look at where Brett Weinstein takes this to.
There's so much happening.
I've been shocked at the proclivity of so many of my friends to subscribe wholeheartedly to the woke mentality. Do you think intellect and attention to detail has anything to do with the political choices people make?
So this is one of these things I often reference that Eric once said to me. In fact, I think I've called it the smartest thing anyone ever said, which was, truth is the second best strategy. And by that, he meant that social affiliation, that is to say, signing on to what the group that has power wants you to say in order that it will share its power with you, is often a much better strategy than truth. So
all right, pause it for 1 second. I just want to break this down because these are just like non sequitur applied upon non sequiturs. It really feels forced on some level. So the question is, do you think intellect and attention to detail a bulwark against wokeism? That's basically the question, right? Like, do your my facts don't care about your feelings is basically what the question is. And he turns it to strategy. And what is the strategy that he's talking about? Like, when you strategize something, you want a goal, and he calls it power. But I think it's probably what he's talking about in the context of this world that we inhabit is clout. What is power in the YouTube podcast world, which is what I think he's really talking about, because their whole world is sort of like narrowly defined as that. And that is like clicks and celebrity. Yeah. And then maybe money ultimately, but clicks and celebrity. So just like, I just want people to understand like track his thinking here.
Is that I think is going on with those who don't sign up with this. It's one of two things. Either they have correctly realized that they could get somewhere in the short term by signing on, but that they will ultimately be confronted by this thing in the end, so it's not a good deal. Or they are sticklers for the truth. And the fact is, I think all of us sticklers for the truth are, I don't want to call us broken, but we do not have the circuit that allows you to just simply socially affiliate no matter what kind of nonsense it forces to come out of your mouth. Right?
Okay, now I want you to go back here, but what he's saying is that like there's two types of people. Some people who go along to get that power and will join the herd essentially and espouse this stuff. But then there's people like us who are so wedded to the truth that we're almost broken. It's like a humble brag here. We're so wedded to the truth that that we actually we don't just make social affiliations as that we demand that the truth take us where we want to go. All right, and so that's what he's saying here. And again, it's not really what the question was. The question was about intellect and attention to detail, but he's turned it into like a social strategy where I'm not successful, he's saying, in part, I'm not powerful because I'm so wedded to the truth that I'm broken in this game that I have talked about what the best strategy is.
It's not a good deal. Or they are sticklers for the truth. And the fact is, I think all of us sticklers for the truth are, I don't want to call us broken, but we do not have the circuit that allows you to just simply socially affiliate no matter what kind of nonsense it forces to come out of your mouth. Right? Some people do. And the fact that they say some crazy thing and everybody cheers assures them that it must be right. Mm-hmm. So anyway, this can happen all over the place. There's some danger, in the case of Dave Rubin, for example, that he's hearing, the cheers of a bunch of people who are all concentrated in one mindset, and he thinks that what he's saying is making sense, and in fact, it seems to be making less sense over time as he's moving closer to a group that is united behind ideas that are not robust.
Closer to a different ideology than one that he formerly ascribed to, but seems to be a jump from ideology to ideology rather than to more first principles thinking.
Yeah.
And now, okay, so this is just amazing. Can you imagine talking about something about like social dynamics and just using Dave Rubin as like your pivot point? It's just bizarre. And the amazing thing is like he's not naming, there's nothing, the only thing specific that he's talking about is this individual. These guys are supposed to be about ideas and this and that. And all he's saying is the idea is not robust. In other words, Dave Rubin now subscribes to bad ideas.
Yeah.
And it's because there's a group of people who appreciate his bad ideas. Like he doesn't get specic about it. Like this is like literally like
it could be said in two sentences essentially. Like that's just so furious.
And I guess his wife, I don't know her name, Heather. She says that, well, he's just moved from ideology to ideology. I don't know what the first ideology was, right? Presumably the ideology he had was the one that was shared by the IDW, But she then says there's no first principles, which suggests that maybe there was no first principles in the first adoption of the ideology he had. Or are they arguing that they're not ideological at all? It's just that he went from the left to the right or something, but we can't know because there's no specificity in this conversation whatsoever.
At all.
Sound
not robust.
Closer to a different ideology than one that he formerly ascribed to, but seems to be a jump from ideology to ideology rather than to more first principles thinking.
Yeah. And, you know, I've seen him of late attack Chloe.
Yeah.
He's attacked Josephine Matthias.
Mm-hmm.
No idea.
There's no reason. We know both of these people.
My sister.
Incredibly bright, incredibly insightful, and frankly open to other perspectives. Both of them have that characteristic in spades. So why, you know, on what basis could you possibly attack them? Well, to the extent that he has now moved in the direction of an ideology that can't abide voices like theirs, he now can't even hear what they're saying.
What are they saying?
SNL sketch, guys. This is ridiculous.
I mean,
is Alec Baldwin going to come out now?
He's talking about like, you know, social affiliation, and people fall into that trap. And then he's just saying, like, you know, pointing out, like, they haven't talked about an idea. It's all just like
jargon.
Dave is made fun of Chloe and Jenny, and how could you possibly criticize them? Yeah. And they're so open to different ideas, and how could you possibly make fun of them? But meanwhile, Heather just said that the problem they have with Dave is that he just moved from ideology to ideology, which suggests that he's open to ideas, but those aren't robust ideas. I'm just saying that, like, he's picking on our friends, and we know them. They're cool. And so how could you pick on them? It's so weird.
And he moved to the other ideology because other people are listening to that ideology.
That's right.
Can't forget that.
Right.
Oh my God.
And the IDW thing has been the world's greatest marketing, mechanism. And let's just see the tail end of that again.
Chloe?
Yeah.
He's attacked Josephine Matthias.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason. We know both of these people. Incredibly decent, incredibly bright, incredibly insightful, and frankly open to other perspectives. Both of them have that characteristic in spades. So why, you know, on what basis could you possibly attack them? Well, to the extent that he has now moved in the direction of an ideology that can't abide voices like theirs, he now can't even hear what they're saying.
Yeah. If the primary
it's like they won't talk about like conservatism like it's like Lord Voldemort. We can't say the name.
What did they do before? Anybody have a sense? Because, you know,
well, they're
it's just reheated Dave Rubin stuff. Oh, what did they do? Yeah, they were both evergreen academics, and they left in the whole evergreen affair.
Of course. Okay.
Yeah.
It's stunning to me that, I mean, look, and here's the thing. I want to make this absolutely clear. What we do on this show, particularly in the fun half, is this kind of like AM talk radio. I dip into conservatives. I mock them. I try and put it, and I do so. I put that out up front. Like, I'm not pretending anything else is going on here when we do those segments. There are other parts of the show that I don't do that. I interview a historian, or I interview a policymaker, an epidemiologist, whatever it is. But in this part of the show, we're doing some of this stuff. I'm going to put it on YouTube, and we are specifically trying to show the ridiculousness and the holes and mock these people. We're trying to do that. Now, I know this is beneath them. They just talk about ideas being robust, as opposed to like my word, which is like, this is idiotic. Yeah. And they don't and they don't talk about personalities except for like, how could you possibly make fun of Margie and Gwendolyn? They're wonderful people. We know them. I mean, I'm explicit about it. I don't pretend to be something that I'm not. These guys, if you're an intellectual and the words Dave Rubin come out of your mouth, in anything other than like, I can't believe the New York Times would write a piece on this charlatan from day one. If you are an intellectual and you weren't aware that Dave Rubin was a charlatan, it's because he was welcoming you on his show, and you are now guilty of the very thing that you were indicting him for, which is, oh, I have access now to his audience and his platform. These guys are all charlatans.
Mm-hmm. If you're an intellectual and you can't cite anything, then you're not an intellectual.
It's unrobust.
It's just like floating over any kind of specificity. It's just hilarious.
I can't wait to see Pete Buttigieg move into that space because I feel like he's perfect for it.
It's such a weird combination of things too, to like give the sort of like highfalutin, slow, like didactic sort of delivery of just absolutely nothing, of air, basically.
I just think that Gwen and Barbara are wonderful people, and it's amazing that they could be attacked on what grounds?
I don't know, some crazy ideological grounds, which we won't get into.
Just because...
First ideology.
I mean, we were talking about
this... Just because Barbara took Kevin to the prom? Like, I don't get it.
This is sub-progressive voice. Like, at least the progressive voice, he dissects the actual arguments and gets into the meat of the stuff. This is just like, how dare he criticize?
It's unbelievable. But I do appreciate, and I will say this, as a coda, I do appreciate that these guys are basically like, you know, Eric said on Rogan's show that I was, you know, zeroing in on Dave Rubin as a wounded antelope, and I was separating him from the herd so that I could slaughter him, I guess, and presumably walk off and feast on him like a jackal. But I do appreciate these guys are now taking the carcass and swooping in and picking at it like vultures.
Actually, that's Dave Rubin's skull on the table. I don't know if you noticed.
Oh my god, that's funny. That's
also the juxtaposition of like they're set like it's so manly in the bandana, and then they're like, but really, Gwendolyn must be. What is this?
It's so strange. It's so strange.